All right. It's reverse redaction, and it's another day in paradise. I'm coming to you from a undisclosed location, and got two fellow alumni, reverse redaction alumni with me, Jared and Steven. And we're going to reverse redact.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guardians of the Galaxy, that title, I don't know why, but it is one of the hardest names to remember. I don't know if it's because like Galaxy and Guardians, like my mind goes other places whenever I'm thinking I want to say the Guardians of Gaul, or there's like different movie names that come into my head other than Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know why.
Interesting.
It is a bit wordy for a group of superheroes. You have Justice League or Avengers or Legion of Doom or the Brotherhood or X-Men, and then you have Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a lot of syllables.
It is. Maybe that's what it is. But before we get into it, let's do our simultaneous sigh as we draw in whatever is invisible around us. Sounds weird. But so, let's blow all our toxins out. And together, sigh. One big sigh. And there's just something soothing about doing it simultaneously together. That's redundant, I guess. Simultaneously together. But anyways,
simultaneously together as a group, all in one.
At the same time.
Yeah.
Symbiotically.
In unison.
Yeah.
But it's good to take a deep breath. And I think it's important to take a deep breath before we jump into this pretty lighthearted movie. I was pretty amazed how funny it was when I first watched it. It was just, I was laughing hard throughout the whole time. So this is a James Gunn movie. Now, prior to this movie, did you know anything about James Gunn? Were you guys privy to like Super? Did you watch Super or any of these other kind of quirky comedies he'd done?
No.
I had nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. Not only was I not familiar with James Gunn, I really knew nothing, despite being like a Marvel Comics fan of X-Men, Spider-Man, and some others. I don't know if I'd ever even heard of Guardians of the Galaxy. And so, I heard that, Marvel was then going to follow. Did this come out right after Avengers, or I can't remember where it followed in the timeline?
It's 2014, or was it 2014, I think.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if it was. So it was not too long. I guess maybe 2 years after Avengers. Either way,
I think it was after Ant-Man, maybe, or something.
Okay. Either way, I heard about how it was gonna, feature a talking raccoon and a talking tree, and I'm like, all right, okay, we'll see how this goes. I mean, Marvel's done pretty well so far, but the superheroes have all so far been at least human characters for the most part. I'm trying to think if there was anybody else prior to those two, but I think they were pretty much all human in the movies up to that point. Like, all right, let's see if you can pull this off.
Yeah. Well, I had been privy to his movie Super. That was with like who's the guy? Rainn Wilson, the guy who plays
Dwight.
What's his name? Dwight Schrute. And in this quirky superhero movie, I hadn't actually seen the movie, but a lot of my friends loved it. To me, it looked a little too quirky. But when I heard that Guardians of the Galaxy was coming, when I saw the preview, I was thinking, well, this is their attempt at a comedy. I thought it was going to be cheesy comedy. It wasn't going to be funny. It was going to be like a failed Marvel switch up. Like we're gonna try our hand at just straight comedy. Like it was gonna be like a how sometimes the franchises will try doing like what is it, like a documentary that's not a like a fake documentary,
A mockumentary.
There we go, mockumentary or something. I thought it was gonna be something like that. It's like, oh man. But I was a huge Chris Pratt fan, so I was, there's mixed feelings. Going into it, what were you feeling, Steven?
Incredibly low expectations. I think to that point, I was definitely like so many people on the Marvel train at that point. And when I heard about this, I was like, I really don't see how this is going to work at all. Like hearing about it felt like I didn't know anything about James Gunn as a director. I really enjoyed Chris Pratt, but like from kind of what I was seeing in the trailers, like it felt very like I laughed and stuff, but I was like, man, it feels kind of derivative a little bit, like his character. And then like for me, I didn't actually see it. I never actually saw this in the theater. I actually saw this for the first time on an airplane going to Uganda that summer, and so it's finally we can see it, and I don't have to pay money for it. So if it's bad, great, although cost of the ticket, I guess, whatever. The ensemble cast as a whole though really had me wondering, because like you, Judah, I was a big fan of Chris Pratt from Parks and Rec at that point, and the WWE fan in me was really excited to see Dave Bautista in like a major role. I was just like happy for him, like the pro wrestling loyalist in me like wanted to support him getting because I was a big fan of his as a wrestler, and I was like, no one realizes what kind of like subtle comedic talent he has, and little did I know they found out about him for sure and leaned into that hard in the movie. And then I was really interested in seeing and knowing that they had gotten Bradley Cooper and Vin Diesel as a part of the cast as well, even though they were just doing voice work. I'm like, man, if they were able to get that many names for the movie, surely there's got to be a little something more to it. And also, even though this one didn't quite turn up as well as the others, I used to be a huge fan of this short-lived show called Pushing Daisies on ABC.
The bad guy
the main
show,
the main character from that series was Ronan, and I was just like, oh, that's so great, and I was so excited because I think Pushing Daisies had ended maybe like a year before or something, and I'm like, oh, a lot of it was just loyalty to the actors. It turned out, and being a completionist in a sense. Like if I've seen all the other Marvel movies at this point, I might as well see this one too. And so spoiler alert for me, that's actually that's my favorite individual film out of the whole MCU.
Really?
It is. And I had the lowest expectations going into it as well. So it was a really weird experience for me. Not saying it's the best film, it's just my favorite. It's a sentimental favorite.
I think that has a lot to do with its success, because I went back and watched a lot of it last night and it's like, it doesn't have a lot of rewatch value per se. Like there are scenes that I could watch over and over again. We're gonna, I'm sure, talk about this, but in general, the movie, I don't know, it's a fun movie, but it's a lot like a lot of other Marvel movies. It doesn't have a good deal of rewatch value in the sense of there's not that depth, complexity that has me coming back like, oh man, I didn't get that the second time. I didn't get that the first time. I'm seeing a lot more in it this time. Do you guys track with that at all?
I mean, maybe, depth or complexity in terms of story twists, but I think it grows on me in a way each time I watch it, because when I watched it the first time, I was like, yeah, I like this. This is okay. This is good. But I think it's actually grown on me. And I think there's a lot of depth in the fact that you're talking about that it's a really funny movie, but in a lot of ways too, like if you look at the, each character's backstory and what brings them together, it's really sort of a, it's these like sad, depressing circumstances, where StarLord gets into the intergalactic mix because his mother dies of cancer, and then he's abducted by these guys. Gomorrah, her parents are murdered by Thanos, and then he raises her. And, she's raised in this situation where her and her sister have to fight. And which she gets the better end of that because, whenever she beats Nebula, Nebula gets some sort of cybernetic body part in order to try to make her better. Rocket was this raccoon that, he's had experiments done on him. There was a scene. I always look at the scene like thinking about how funny the movie is. And then there's like, a scene when they're in prison where, Rocket's going in, like changing into his little prison jumpsuit or something. And StarLord sees his back and he just sees all these like plugs in his back, almost kind of like the Matrix, these Matrix plugs in the back. Batista's character Drax, his wife and daughter were murdered in front of him, and all this. So it appeals to me in like the emotional complexity of it. So I agree. There's not in terms of like, major plot twists or anything like that. I guess other than, the fact that I do like the, and I think we can pretty well talk about spoilers. If someone hasn't seen Guardians of the Galaxy at this point, screw you. You're just out of luck. But at the end where where humans aren't supposed to be able to hold the stone without it destroying them, and he's able to hold it long enough. And actually this time I did catch something that I hadn't seen before, where or didn't remember from before, where I think the Collector tells them that, or someone tells them that a group of people, maybe it's the Nova folks, like a group of people tried to hold the stone at one point, and they couldn't do it. It destroyed all of them. And so then that made it even more impactful, at the end where, they, the group of them are able to, hold it and wield it and use it to destroy Ronan. So yeah, it's got some emotional complexity for me.
Yeah, it does. That is true. And I guess I'm not talking about plot twists, because sometimes plot twists make a movie even less rewatchable, right? Because once you see the plot, like a lot of these M. Night Shyamalan movies, you go back and
true,
it's like, I already know what's going to happen. Although M. Night Shyamalan has more, like there's more going on. I guess what I'm talking about is it was pretty two-dimensional for the most part. Now, speaking of two-dimensional, what really drew me in from the beginning, well, other than Chris Pratt, Chris Pratt he makes the movie amazing. Just that first scene where he's singing and kicking the rats and stuff like that just like got me hooked right away. But the thing going back and watching it that I appreciated, it was maybe because I've been watching special effects videos on Digital Corridors. They've got a second channel, but was the special effects, the CGI was flawless. Rocket is flawless. He's just flawless. I never throughout the movie think, yeah, that's a cartoon. The whole time they've got me fooled that this is a real like thing that I'm looking at. And Groot too. Groot is now sometimes I think more in this when he's like a baby or a teenager, it's not as flawless, but as a grown tree and just when he's sprouting and stuff like that, I never thought that this is cartoony or that looks plastic or anything like that,
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, and the other thing that I caught last night was just the casting. I felt like the casting was perfect, almost perfect. I thought Batista's character perfect. Bradley Cooper was perfect. Chris Pratt, I think. No, I don't think anybody knew he could before this knew that he could be like a leading And see, the thing is, he's not really a leading like the. He is much more of a, I don't know.
Like an everyman kind of
Yeah,
guy.
like in every man. He's not like a
Yeah.
hero in the sense of he is, but I
Well,
think the ongoing joke for him is that he has insecurities about being that, that leading
Well,
person.
he's just such an emotionally stunted character. And that was, I think, watching it again most recently was the biggest impact for me, was viewing his character in light of all of his other characters, his character, all the other decisions his character makes in the films after this. Like, he, after Infinity War came out, he got the most crap for like ruining everything, in the moment where they could have stopped Thanos, and then he finds out that Gamora had been killed. And also, screw you if you don't know about Infinity War at this point either, I guess, right?
Man,
I'm just trying to jump on the bandwagon
so
here.
aggressive. People haven't watched Marvel.
Hey, I'm just saying, billions of dollars here.
And you do get people who complain like, "Oh, you spoiled that movie from like a movie from 7 years ago." It's like, look,
right.
I'm sorry, we can't, So
Following the path of tragedy in his life is pretty amazing, and I'm glad that Jared brought up the scene where he was looking at Rocket in the prison, because this is the first time I've watched this film a lot of times, that I'd never really noticed in the opening scene where he's talking to his mom that he's got like a black eye or something like that, and she's asking him like, why are you always getting into fights? And he tells her, it's like only 2 lines, but he tells this brief story about how he watched all these other kids kill a frog, and he's like, that frog didn't do anything to hurt anybody. And so he's already got this like built-in sympathy for like abused innocent creatures. And a lot of throwaway expositional lines landed on me a little bit more this time, because I'm so familiar with everything else that's already going on. And like when they're doing that breakdown about, when they're standing in front of the sort of suspect line, one by one, and give the exposition on every character. Rocket, they said, was an illegal experiment. Like, so he wasn't even supposed to have existed. Like, and speaking of Infinity War real quick, one thing I did watch, if you guys have like a digital version of Infinity War or the Blu-ray or something, there is a director's roundtable. It's like a little 30-minute piece, and the special features, which is awesome. It's like Whedon, Favreau, Gunn, Ryan Coogler, Taika Waititi, like all of them like sitting around a table and talking about their contributions to the MCU. And Gunn talks about Rocket being like his favorite character because he's basically he says he's basically Frankenstein's monster. And it's what he had in mind in writing him, like, and even like later on in the movie where they're all getting drunk at that intergalactic casino or whatever.
That's like in the middle of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, he, gets wasted, and it's just like, I never asked to be made this way, And I think that's probably it's just an example of the driving force of the film to me. What always keeps me coming back to it is that at the end of the day, this is a story about broken people coming together, and like, despite everyone's flaws and hangups and stuff, if broken people find one another in community, they can do something great together. And their mistakes aren't erased necessarily. They're still all broken people, but like, they need one another, and they sort of, it's cheesy to say it this way, but I can't think of it. They complete one another, they fill in each other's, missing places. And that's, that climax of them all holding the stone together is like one of my, as far as moments go, might be one of my favorite MCU like climactic moments.
I was thinking about that same thing. Like when I watched it again, I was like, I would put the movie not quite as high as you. I mean, probably like towards the edge of my top 5. But I was thinking like, as far as like climactic moments or, final boss fights or whatever, it would be like probably this and Endgame. And like those two would probably be the ones that are up there, like in terms of the final moment. Because a lot of the the Marvel movies really don't have like this big, climactic, final punch with the boss character sort of thing. So I was thinking about that same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this time around, I think not only StarLord's like just emotional maturity or lack thereof, but his relationship to his mom. That's much more present throughout the movie than I really realized. There these little things, which I'm sure probably other people noticed a long time ago, and I'm a little late to the party on it. But clearly, he has these hangups, and he's very attached to his music, which I'm sure we probably at some point in this discussion we'll talk about the music and how perfect of a fit it was. Really, it was almost like an additional character in the movie. But how he's so attached to his Walkman, and gets into a fight with a prison guard because he sees someone else listening to it, and the first few times I saw it, I was just like, it's a interesting choice for him to be so angry. Like, I get he's attached to his stuff and it does remind him of his mom and everything, but at the end of the movie he opens that gift from his mom, and you find out that she's the one who first ever called him StarLord.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a new mixtape for him to listen to, and it again was paying way more attention in the opening scene than I ever did before. She gives him that gift right before she dies and says, "Open this when I'm gone." And I feel like he was never ready to really let go of her until he embraced the rest of the Guardians as his family. And at that point, like, he's reading, he puts the tape on and he's reading the letter, and they're playing, the Ain't a Mountain High Enough. And he looks over and Gomorrah's staring at him, and he looks at her, and she just she's not dancing, but she is dancing a little bit. It's kind of like, this is more good music. I'm glad you showed it to me that night, and that kind of stuff. And like, it's just all these really like kind of subtle glances and moments to notice that he does have a family now, and that's what he was missing. And he's okay to let go of his mom now. And it's I don't know, I thought that was really cool, the way that was done, and such a typically kind of silly movie throughout, that it really hits you hard if you're paying in moments when you're not necessarily expecting it.
Yeah, I was thinking about kind of to that same point, like going back to the scene where he's holding the stone, and I remembered from before where he sees his mother, or he has the memory of his mother, asking him to take her hand. And before, I think maybe the first couple of times watching it through, I didn't really think about it that hard. I think maybe I just thought like, oh, he's kind of like hallucinating her or something like that. And then when I thought about it more, I thought, oh no, it's kind of like, in a way, it's more like him finally being willing to, I guess, sort of establish this connection with someone else in a really hard moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
it's a growth moment for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, oh man, and that moment, man, for anyone who thinks Pratt is just a comedic actor, like that tear moment, that gets that every time, even the 45th time of seeing this movie, as we said,
yeah,
that every time.
Yeah, that's the scene that we're talking about at the end, where they starting before. So particularly love the dance off part when he just starts dancing, and this is testimony to what's his name, the guy you said from Pushing Up Daisies.
Lee Pace is his name.
Yes, Lee Pace is testimony to his acting, because he just looks over him. He's like, he's about ready to blow him up, kill him. but he's curious. He's like, what?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
What are
It's
you
so
doing?
situationally inappropriate, you know,
Yeah.
so situationally inappropriate and unexpected that he's just like, what? Wait, what?
Huh?
And Chris Pratt sells the heck out of
Yeah, he
it.
does.
Man.
Yes.
He's like, okay, go hard, you know.
Yeah. Listen to these words.
Yeah.
I can't help but I will watch that scene, just the whole thing, because you go, and this is something that the pace of the movie does. It goes. It has such a. There's just the pacing when it comes to going from comedy to serious to heart, wrenching. Like in that scene alone, you have like that just hilarious moment to action to when you see his mom, and if you make that connection between him finally realizing that there's somebody who cares about him, right? That he's finally making a connection outside of his mom. Like it's rapid, but it's paced well to where like it's a wonderful scene. Just
and a
to watch.
testament to the writing and performance of not only Pratt but the writing of the film too is that when he challenges him to the dance off, which kudos to all the Footloose clues up until that point.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly bought that is something StarLord would have done in a moment of desperation, not even thinking that they might actually be trying to like plot something as a decoy on the side. I'm like, I totally bought that in that moment. If all hope is lost, like StarLord's like, what should I do? Okay, man, let's have a dance off, whatever. And like, it didn't seem at all out of character.
Oh, and everything fits so perfectly with their characters, because as soon as they hit, you see Rocket, and I don't know if I noticed this when I first watched it, but Rocket he gets started right away.
Yes,
on making the gun, and he just starts putting things together, just so like Rocket, right? And Zoe Saldana and her strength. My biggest problem is Zoe Saldana. I've never enjoyed her acting, and I felt like even the writing for her in this movie was just so one-dimensional. I didn't see enough. Like, she was just a strong person, but just a boring character for me the whole time. I never saw. There wasn't enough, and going back to I don't know, maybe it's an overarching thing for me, but there wasn't enough complexity in her character. I think she was such a major cosmic character. There was so much going on with her allegiances, with her emotions, underneath her facade of strength. All I ever really saw was the strength. And to me, I don't know. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't distracting. But going back and watching it, I'm like,
yeah.
Go ahead.
With her, is sort of I think a greater issue I have with Marvel a little bit is writing complex female characters consistently.
Yep.
Now I will give them a pass on Gomorrah, and only because of the following reason: she was a central plot point. I think she didn't exist. I mean, surely they had a little bit of a long game plan at this point, anyways, heading towards, because Thanos is a character in this movie, of where they were going. And so she really in this movie didn't exist beyond being an assassin turned love interest. And I'm okay with her not being that emotionally complex as an assassin, because why would she be? But she gets a little bit more time in the sequel, although I'd argue that Nebula, her sister, is probably a better fleshed out character at this point in the universe than she is. And
Absolutely.
Fantastically, I might add. Yes. That was something I didn't see coming. I was like, wow, she is great. Before I just start getting off on different tangents, I'll just sum it up by saying I think by the end of the third sequel, when it comes out, I think we'll have a better fully realized rationale on how well they've handled her character, because they have a real opportunity to explore her more in this third one that's coming. Depending on what they do, I'd say they have a chance with how everything has left settled in the dust. They almost can kind of hit the reset button on her really after Endgame, technically. So they kind of have another crack at it. But I do have, a little bit of an issue with, but also like, what do you do? Like if you spend more time developing her, do you take that away from another character or I don't know. I don't know how that works, but no, I see what you're saying, and I am at least 1 foot on board with you in that. She didn't take away from the movie, but she definitely felt less fleshed out to me than the other 4.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying about. I think maybe by the third one they'll have more of an opportunity to work with her, but I don't know. I kind of disagree. I kind of see like she's in the Star Trek remakes too, right?
Yeah,
that's the same actress, right? Yeah.
And Avatar.
She plays who?
Oh, and Avatar. Yeah, she's in like every space movie. Yeah,
she's the new Christopher Lee. Remember, there was a time where he was in Hugo Weaving. Sorry.
Oh yeah, Hugo Weaving. Yeah,
when he was in like all the big trilogies.
Yeah, I remember nothing about. It's been so long since I've seen Avatar. I don't remember anything about her character from there. But Star Trek, I don't really care for that much. But yeah, this one it didn't. I would agree that she's not as emotionally fleshed out as the others, but I also think that makes sense for her character living under the rule of Thanos. But I think there are a couple, there are little moments where you see like they don't try to just like push her ahead as this ultra tough character. Like that scene where she goes into the prison where she's trying to look tough. But when she goes in and like closes the cell door behind her, like a group of them like slam up against the glass at one point, like, screaming at her and jeering at her. And she kind of like has this little like jump, sharp breath intake and stuff like that, which is not, it doesn't require a lot, but, I don't know. It just, it didn't really bother me.
Yeah, I understand that. I think it's in those moments where I wanted to see more complexity, like in the moments where, like more moments where you see her struggling, with her inner demons. Even it's just the acting. I think just her acting, because the writing was bad enough for her, but the acting, I didn't see anything special. I didn't see anything like, oh, interesting. Like whereas with Batista, who is this like ultra boring character, right? But his line, he's supposed to be this like real literal character. It has little things that make him incredibly interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say between the two of them, I could just imagine. Zoe Saldana, she's got like Jared said, she's got Star Trek, she's got Avatar. Like Batista, I think this is his first like major opportunity where he's not just playing a henchman or something else, Yeah. And I could totally see him being in a position like, I'm gonna swing for the fences with this.
Do or die.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and thank God he did. I'm so glad he did. With Gomorrah's character though, like I could also see, to Jared's point, I could see her not wanting to be too emotionally complex outwardly, because in her position, like she's probably more out of the Guardians themselves. She's more familiar with the threat they're having to deal with than anybody else. And so she wouldn't want to get too attached to anybody, but she alludes to in Infinity War, like keeping her distance from StarLord a little bit as well for fear that Thanos would just come kill them all. Like she wouldn't even tell them about the Soul Stone initially because like if I tell you, then he's going to kill you too, like, or you're just in that much more danger. That sort of Peter Parker vibe, of like people, I can't share my secret for fear that it might endanger people that much more. And I don't know, like it was, again, with it being an introductory movie to 5 characters nobody had ever heard of pretty much.
Right. So to that point, like going back to what we talked about with with Meet the Robinsons. I thought that the casting here was really interesting because it's not like all no names. I mean, they're all inexperienced to some extent. Probably Zoe Salanda has probably the most. Well, no, Bradley Cooper.
Cooper,
Cooper,
yeah.
But
as far as on-screen people, though.
But Cooper doesn't have a lot of experience as a voice actor, at this point.
True.
Allegedly, he was doing a Joe Pesci Goodfellas impression for his inspiration as Rocket. I read that somewhere.
Interesting. But I paid close attention to Groot last night because I was like, I've never really, I was kind of bored with at the beginning, kind of bored, and I was like watching Groot. And Groot, what's his name? Vin Diesel. Even in the inflection of his voice, I felt was more interesting than Gomorrah. I guess here's the thing that comes to mind right now is this is such a cartoon of a movie, like it flirts with the absurd so much, and everybody has these like caricatures that they're playing, and she just kind of plays it straight,
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing. She doesn't take any risks with her character, which is fine. She wasn't distracting at all. At least she didn't take a risk and it didn't pay off. But
that's a necessity for comedy, though. You have to have somebody be the straight man in the situation in order for all the hilarity to really bounce off.
Yeah, but in a good comedy, the straight man is like straight to an extreme. Like kind of like Drax. Like he's a straight man that is like funny because he's so straight. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think they're afforded to have both. I think in that situation. Here's a question: if someone had told Vin Diesel like 10 years ago, hey, we're going to give you 2 franchises where you're a part of an ensemble of criminals who prefer to call yourselves a family. And one, you're going to be a car driver, and one, you're going to be a talking tree. Which one do you think is going to be more beloved by the public?
You're so right.
Like, how ironic.
Yeah, it's true. Although, what's his name from Fast and Furious? Is a pretty beloved character. Not half,
not
half as much as Groot.
He's a lucrative character. I'll say that. They just need to go to space already in that franchise. Crossover.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on. The last thing I wanted to talk about was what do we take from this movie? Because we've talked a little bit about connection and family. What was the thing that you guys, like, having watched it many times, what do you get from this for your own life?
I think it is so much about just. I think so much about that the book ending of the movie with him and his mom, the regret. He was so possessed by his grief, and his hurt in the beginning that he lost the chance, which is something I would never wish on another person, losing the chance to have that last moment with somebody you love because you're too afraid of what's coming. And even though I don't understand necessarily maybe what was being implied there, I kind of like what you guys were saying with that when he sees her again at the end. I'm not really sure what's going on, but the fact that him grabbing Gamorah's hand was representative of him getting another chance to do that and make that right. It's just not letting your insecurities or your failures, your eternal imperfections, this side of the kingdom, I suppose, keep you from loving and connecting and being in community with other people, and also not letting their imperfections keep you from bringing them in either. Like,
well, use I statements like this. Is what, like, for you? This is
sure.
What you took?
Yeah. For me, it's like there's a rapper or poet, I don't really know how he refers to himself, called Listener, and he's got a He's got a song called Wooden Heart, and he talks about our church is all made of all broken ships or shipwrecks, and I think about myself and how all the ways I'm broken as an individual, but that doesn't keep my family from letting me have the place in our family that I have, and for loving me, and that does not serve as a rejection. And so in return, the way that I love other people will be despite any flaws that they have, and loving and accepting them, and moving forward together, and not letting my regrets or my fears of failure or things like that prevent me from progress in my life or in the life of leading my family.
I like that.
That's good. Gosh, it's hard to. I think the main thing is, like Steven said, like the idea of a group of broken people whose families have been torn apart in one way or the other, coming together and sort of healing through each other. I love that theme. I think that was sort of a big theme in Lost. One of the reasons that I liked Lost so much as a TV show. Beyond that, I mean, I think one little thing that I kind of took away from watching the movie this time that I really liked was relating to Rocket's practicality in terms of like relating to his like I guess maybe ingenuity too, and practicality of he's got like you said. I can't remember, one of you said earlier about like at the end where he sees the gun and he immediately like goes to work, like trying to put the gun together to somehow have a Hail Mary plan. I didn't really think about that as much till you said it, but I was thinking back to where they're flying the little mining pod things, and he's basically tells them like, yeah, just like crash them into each other, and then there's another one where, oh gosh, I think I just blanked out on it. But I did get a kick out of, it's where he just crashes the ship into Ronan when Ronan is on his ship, like about to kill Drax, and he just brings the whole ship in there. It's just, because I think a lot of times that's my mentality is just like, all right, none of this other stuff is working. We're gonna have to get a little more extreme with some of these things. And sorry, there's a noise outside the window. And then where he's I do also like the part where they're in jail and he's like coming up with this plan of like, okay, we got to do this and this, all right, and we definitely this is the last thing that we want to do is get this thing on the wall, because if we do, and then Groot's already over there pulling it off, and it completely, I just think so many times in my life I have felt that way where I'm like, all right, we'll just do this. I've worked out this plan, and someone just runs off, and
well, we improvise,
right? So I think I really just related to his character in a lot of ways, and got more out of his character watching this time. And I think going through watching something multiple times, you get those opportunities to pick up on more stuff that like you're not really honed in on the first couple of times through. You're just watching the movie and getting the experience, and once you kind of know what's happening, you get more of an opportunity to kind of focus on those little things. And this time for me it was just really loving Rocket's character.
One thing that came to my mind this morning, similar to that, and because of Rocket, and I'd say Gomorrah too, from a negative standpoint, is not negative as in like I didn't like.
You've got to watch Captain Marvel, because Gomorrah.
Okay, wait. The same writer who wrote Gamora wrote for Captain Marvel.
Oh,
You
God.
might feel better about Gamora.
You will. You'll feel better about movies.
Oh, come on.
That's
It's
terrible.
not that bad.
But listen, something to that extent. I was actually thinking about Captain Marvel and the complaints about it. Is that the thing? Because I was looking at something on my lip this morning. I was like, man, this is weird. You know, that little zit coming in, and I was thinking about the zits in our life and like how like so much of me. I'll put it I statement. So much of me is trying to hide stuff about my life and me and usually my body, you know, trying to hide my balding head, not balding, but, you know, places I'm balding and stuff, little things like that. And it struck me, like after watching the movie and thinking about the difference between Rocket and Gomorrah is that it's like everybody has these little like tragedies going on in their life. You know, like it's not a tragedy, but it can be in the moment, right? You're going out and you want to present the best you possible. And here in Florida, everybody is like, because a lot of rich people here at the Four Seasons. But
yeah, some of those Florida cities, Miami especially, is very like cosmopolitan and very yeah.
But it feels to me like just going around and looking at people become way more interesting when you think about like, wow, they have all kinds of little tragedies that they're trying to manage, you know, and just thinking about Rocket and how he just kind of lets a lot of it and most of the characters let a lot of it spill out. And I think that's why I didn't connect with Gomorrah as much is because there's no little vulnerabilities there to connect with. You know, I have like these little tragedies going on in my life, and I'm looking. I guess I'm subconsciously always kind of looking for little tragedies in other people's life to what is the word? But commiserate with. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard for me to with Gomorrah. I think I'm now curious to really like go back and watch again and watch Zoe Saldana's performance because I think part of it is just not really knowing how the character is written in the comics for one, but then two, in terms of her backstory, like it just makes sense to me that there wouldn't be a lot of vulnerability there from everything that she's come from, where she's been the daughter of Thanos and had to fight her sister to keep from getting body parts cut off and stuff like that. So I think that does therefore make Nebula a much more interesting character because she is the one who's gone through all that. So so yeah, I think just kind of the nature of the character, there's just kind of a limit there to what she realistically would show. But I agree that for that reason, she's sort of less interesting.
She's definitely the hardest to empathize with out of all of them. I think about that scene where you talk about Nebula even being more complex, where Thanos, like in front of Nebula, not Gamora, in front of Nebula, and Ronan says, like, not only did you lose my favorite daughter,
right?
And like I'm like, geez, like, Thanos, 2014 Thanos, man, what are you gonna do?
No chill. Yeah.
No chill in 2014 Thanos. And she's just, and like you get to see Nebula's reaction to hearing that, which is this weird complex of like, well, I don't really want to be your favorite daughter in the first place, but also that hurts. And yeah, it's almost as if I don't know where to put the blame on that, because again, they did such a good job fleshing out so many characters you're meeting for the first time, but also there's, yeah, I mean, because her character doesn't like a lot for a whole lot of exploration in this plot, and yet, yeah, there's still more mystery to her, I guess.
But that for me, it's a challenge to not just so I'm such an emotional person that I tend to just kind of like not avoid, but just consider people that are not as emotional. Like I've had I've had a hard time connecting as much with you, Jared, because like you're not as like vulnerable, right?
I was gonna say, like, yeah, if you have a hard time with that, then you probably have a hard time with me because I know I'm not.
There are times like I have a hard time with you, but like because you're my friend, I you know, like I have to realize that. I see that, you know.
Yeah.
Like I have to say like
I've been in my job now, my current job for I guess going on 2 years or so, and so when we do performance evaluations or whatever, I forget what my boss was saying to me about that. Like she said like you're very hard for everyone to read, and I'm like, yeah, I know.
well,
But
I guess that they don't follow you on Twitter then.
no. No.
Well, and that's the thing that as I think has been able to keep me interested with you. This just sounds like really weird, but like as our friendship continues, I think like our discussions and stuff like that, like in this format and on Facebook and Twitter, I haven't really discussed with you on Twitter, like has been able to give me a deeper glimpse into like, you know, you and your perspective and stuff like that. And so I think that's helped a lot.
Yeah, it's yeah, gosh, now that you mentioned that, like I guess like going back to Gomorrah and stuff. Yeah, I mean, even though personality wise, or not personality wise, but I guess like thinking wise, I relate to Rocket in a lot of ways. Like, yeah, just I think a lot of stuff from I didn't have Gomorrah extreme level circumstances, but you know, again, I grew up in a very dysfunctional household. Just a lot of just weird stuff. I mean, it like I don't know how much I've ever really gone into some of this stuff, and that's a whole other rabbit trail. But you know, just like so I can relate in some ways. Like I was the product of my dad's second marriage, my mom's first marriage, and so when my parents got married, my dad was 50 and my mom was like 24. And I've got a older half brother who's the same age as my mom from my dad's first marriage, and who just always, disliked me just basically for, existing. Because I mean, for him, even though he didn't have like a really good relationship with my dad, in my dad's first marriage, he was physically abusive with his first wife and my half brother. And even though it was a bad situation with me growing up, he wasn't physically abusive with us. But that is sort of like a Nebula Gomorrah sort of thing, so there was a lot of resentment towards me, not because of, anything was particularly great with our situation, but just, it wasn't as bad as his. So, and so when you do grow up, thinking wise, I do relate to Rocket a lot more, but like emotionally, like I guess maybe that's why I connect with Gomorrah, is like, I just completely understand, like when you grow up in hard circumstances, like you have to take like a very specific, either take a specific track to it, or in some ways, I guess like whatever's your coping mechanism inside that's going to come out with that. And I think for me, it's just like, sort of like, harden up, toughen up, don't show a lot of emotion. And it's not even really like it's not a conscious thing where I'm like, oh, I'm having to hold this back. It's like, you do just sort of, I think, start to feel less, it's like you get sort of dulled to it. So, that's interesting. That's the kind of
can I tell you that when you shared that about because this is not the first time you shared that. Like we've had reverse redactions about family, and we've talked to, here and there. But I hear a little bit more each time, and the more I hear about you, the closer I feel to you. You know, and I mean, this is a psychological thing that being in the field, me and about. But but you probably are the closest friend I have that I know the least about.
Right.
On more levels than just one.
It's a gift to have friendships that continue to produce new rewards. Every day. Some of us probably some of us, Judah. I guess I'm probably more like you than I am, Jared. I don't know, a little bit more of an open book with my life. And so, eventually, you've read this book a number of times and it doesn't produce a whole lot more new material. So, on that end,
I don't know about
all that to say, all that to say, keeping yourself, playing your cards close to the vest for whatever reason, and revealing them when the time is right or when time is comfortable, serves in its own way to be a fruitful and lasting friendship. And I think we both appreciate that.
Well, and I mean, even, Ford was my roommate my senior year of college. And really, like, most of this stuff, I don't think I'd ever told him until like a few years back. Somehow, I don't remember it came up, but I was down in Panama City Beach and was out me and him and Melissa went out to someplace to eat. And I don't know how it came up, but anyway, and I said, like, yeah, it's one of those things, where, like, when you have this sort of, like, I don't know, it is dark in some ways, backstory or upbringing. Like, to me, it feels like there's sort of a narrow window, and maybe this is not true, but this is kind of how it feels. There's sort of a narrow window to bring it up with people because you don't want to bring it up too early, because then people are like, oh, okay, you must be crazy. Let's not continue this relationship any further. And Ford had sort of related to that because he shared a lot of stuff with sort of his dad's life. Not necessarily, I mean, I guess some from his own childhood, but really more of kind of like his dad's backstory and how it affected his life and stuff like that. So he kind of understood that. But so you don't want to bring it up too soon initially, but then after a while, like if you let it go too long, then it's kind of like, man, you never told me this, like I don't even know if I feel like I really know you. And so, sometimes there's sort of like, and maybe it's just the fact that there's always a justification in your head for not really bringing it up or getting into it. And then nowadays, like people are married and have families and we're separated by distance and don't really have much of an opportunity to, I think these podcasts have been great for sort of doing it in little kind of incremental forms, but we just don't have as much of a opportunity to really kind of sit down together. So it's kind of a combination of stuff.
Well, and that's why I love doing this, because I mean, it doesn't bother me if we have 2 or 9, in the audience. I don't care.
Right.
It's doing this is really fun for me, and connecting with you guys is great. And to your point, Stephen, just because like there's like revealing of facts in people's lives, but there's also the revealing of like emotions, in the way that, like, well, Ford's a good example. I know everything pretty much there is to know about Ford, but there's always like, and with you, Stephen, there's always this like extra little emotional thing that like will come up, like, oh, I've never seen him get that mad about that. Of course, Ford continues to take iron.
Which one of us are you talking about?
Not you. But
I've never seen Ford get that mad about Tic Tac.
No.
That was like the only thing left that I'd never seen him freak out over.
Oh man!
But there are different levels of emotionality that come out on, like in real time, like, and I want to continue to press us to really be real with that, and to be, and so, and part of that is like when we talk about things, like I do want to continue to remind us to use I statements, and if you guys can encourage me to use I statements, because I feel like sometimes as men, and as humans, we put things out as like, when you do this and you do that, like, remind me.
Removes accountability.
Yeah. Well, not only that. Yeah, and it takes us out of the equation. Whereas let's put ourselves in the equation to really feel it in the moment. Be here now.
Well, that's one thing I really love about this format too. I was telling Jared this after last week, and just just being grateful to be in the conversation. Is that sometimes I have a hard time really kind of tracking like in what's going on conceptually, like in terms of participation. Like I just don't feel smart enough sometimes. So it's nice to have these for me, especially it's nice for me to have a topic like this as an anchor to relate things back to, and it helps me kind of formulate my thoughts if I can compare it to something that we all understand. Because I don't know why the older I get, the more worthless my degree has become.
What is your degree? What was your degree?
Communications. Yeah, broadcasting. So like, I should be way better at this than I have, and I feel like I used to be back when it was just in the radio studio. But I feel like it's just diminishing returns like every day with me. So it's nice to have something to kind of relate to and help me kind of stay on track and sort of articulate my true feelings about things and in relation to that, and then working that out.
Yeah.
It's good.
And I've and my way of thinking of it too, well, is that sometimes you need something to like, sort of are you still there, Judah?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All of a sudden it like your video went out, it just went to your your avatar. Yeah.
It's my phone's probably dying.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's almost, I think of it almost kind of like and I think like especially with some of Ford's stuff, and I would say I openly say this to Ford too. It's not a critique, just kind of a the way I process it or whatever is like it's almost kind of like Cyclops or Havoc in X-Men, where like they've got all this power. It's like with Ford, and it needs to be concentrated somehow. With like Cyclops's visor and Havoc in X-Force, they put this suit on Havoc to help him concentrate it. And so a lot of Ford stuff is really good for me, but sometimes it gets like too abstract, and I feel like I need, at least for me, like a vehicle to kind of a topic to understand more of what he's talking about. So yeah, to Stephen's point,
absolutely.
yeah, like I think it's just like this thing that just like focuses it more, for me.
Yeah, and so many of these movies and tales that we are tackling are metaphorical and for other things going on in our lives, and that's why I like to bring it back to how it really affects us.
Yeah.
Well, I better wrap things up, guys. Yeah. This has been great. My phone's gonna die soon, so
real quick, I want to give a shout out to Gomorrah. One positive thing for her, in that she the script coined the phrase for flirtation as pelvic sorcery, and I don't think that is used enough in our common vernacular. So I think that should be instituted more often.
Very true.
From now on,
pelvic sorcery.
I don't know how much we talk about flirting here.
Doesn't that sound like something that could have like tracked pretty well at TFC though? Like, please.
Yeah, true.
Please avoid any pelvic sorcery.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Are you going to get gratis?
Sounds tantalizing. All right. Well, in a bad way. Well, I got to wrap things up, but thank you guys so much, and get out there. There is a lot to build.
Keep moving forward.
Love alone is worth the fight.
Boom. Oh, and one more thing.